That minister and the Prime Minister have imposed brutal cuts on Canadian families who opened their fridges to find nothing there.
Welcome back to another perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back to question period today, and boy, oh boy, things are heating up.
Let's get into it.
Feed Ontario, a coalition of food banks, released staggering numbers yesterday. 800,000 Ontarians went to the food bank 6 million times. This is a 36% increase, the biggest increase ever. If the total number of people who visited a food bank were a town, it would be the fourth biggest town in all of Ontario, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister therefore cancel his plan to quadruple the carbon tax on the farmers who feed us and pass common sense Conservative Bill 234 to carve out the tax for farmers?
Sure.
Okay, so what is Bill 234? Well, this is Bill 234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Now, you may be surprised to know that the NDP voted with the Conservatives on this, and so did the Bloc. That's why this is where it is. It has reached all the way through the House of Commons, as you can see. It's gone through all of the readings, and it's gone through almost all of the process in the Senate. So it's almost there. Now, what does this bill do? So this enactment amends the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, aka the carbon tax, to expand the definition of eligible farming machinery and extend the exemption for qualifying farming fuel to marketable natural gas and propane. So essentially, what this is doing is saying we need to exempt farmers from the carbon tax. And what would that do? That would reduce the cost of food. Because if farmers are not having to pay a carbon tax, then they don't need to take that extra cost of the food and pass that on to the customer. How is it getting passed down to the customer? Because they're passing it on to the supplier that's actually buying it from them. And then the buyer then passes that on to the customer as well. So it gets passed all along the chain. So immediately you're going to see a reduction in food prices. At least you better. Because if you don't, well, then these grocery stores are going to have a little more to answer to. But that's what they're talking about. But the Liberals have been delaying this in the Senate. Now, to be clear, the Senate is supposed to be independent from the House. The people in the Senate are not part of the elected government in the House. They're different. And they're not supposed to be, quote unquote, working together. But it's pretty obvious they are. So, this is a common sense bill, and it needs to be passed. Farmers don't want to be managing this carbon tax crap, and they shouldn't be passing that cost on to consumers.
Well, because they shouldn't be paying it in the first place. They shouldn't have to pass it on.
Right. And there's like a lot of the food that is out there, you don't pay tax on. Why? Because it's food.
Because it's a necessary item for living.
Right. So why are we adding carbon tax to food? This is where we are, folks. And this is why 800,000 people just in Ontario, they're all going to the food bank. Something's wrong.
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker,
we know that things are challenging for Canadians right now. That is why we are there for them, building more homes faster, providing dental care for children and seniors, cutting child care fees by 50% across the country. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? The only thing that Conservatives know how to do is cut, cut, cut. They would cut child care, dental care, housing. Mr. Speaker, that's not common sense. That is nonsense.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All she can do is stand there and talk about housing, which they built no houses. Childcare, which I thought it was $10 a day childcare. Now she's saying they've cut childcare costs by 50%. What is it? That doesn't make sense. And then you just say, all the Conservatives know how to do is cut, cut, cut. Yeah, they want to cut taxes for people so they can afford to eat. What's wrong with you?
That minister and the Prime Minister have imposed brutal cuts on Canadian families who opened their fridges to find nothing there. The report out demonstrates that in all of the last 7 years, Ontario Food Bank has gone up. And last year it went up by record amounts. 800,000 people went 6 million times to the food bank in this province. There's a bill before the Senate to take the carbon tax of the farmers who feed us rather than quadrupling it as the Prime Minister has said he will do. Will the Prime Minister stop interfering with the independence of the Senate and let the bill pass so that we can bring home affordable food?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Leader of the Conservatives is demonstrating this week that he just can't tell the truth to Canadians. So whether it's the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, where there is no price on pollution, he can't tell the truth to Canadians what he is doing. Whether it is with regard to why he jumped to the conclusion that it was a terrorist attack, he can't tell the truth to Canadians. Whether it's with regards to misogynistic hashtags on YouTube, he can't tell the truth to Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we need to understand why he doesn't trust Canadians with...
May I remind all members not to approach the limit of what would be considered parliamentary and to stay far away from that so that it is not impugned that a member is deliberately not telling the truth. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Okay, so even Greg had to step in there because what she was saying was so ridiculous.
Well, because she was calling Pierre a liar. And it's very, very curious to me that JT gets a new PR guy, and then all of a sudden they're trying to like smear Pierre with the most ridiculous stuff. There is a clause in that treaty that identifies carbon pricing for both Canada and the Ukraine in order for them to do trade with each other. We don't have that with the US. We don't have that with other European countries. Why do we have that with Ukraine? Why are we forcing this on Ukraine? And it was right of the Conservatives to point it out. You can see in our videos, both here and on Twitter, that Pierre used CTV as a source to say media was reporting the possibility of a terrorist attack. How is that him claiming that there was a terrorist attack? He said media was reporting it. He was asking about the validity of that claim. He was asking if the Prime Minister knew anything and what the Prime Minister was going to do about it.
And this is where the Liberals have tied themselves into a complete knot. Because you are funding virtually all of the media and reporters in this country. Are you now telling Pierre, well, you can't trust those reporters in this country, but even though we're paying them?
Whatever they're trying to do right now with this smear campaign they've got against Pierre for like the most ridiculous and insignificant things, it looks absolutely childish and absolutely pathetic and also absolutely desperate.
The truth is the Prime Minister wants to quadruple the carbon tax, including on our farmers. I have a farmer in my riding who's spending $10,000 a month on carbon taxes alone. All of that is passed on to the consumer. The consequences have been a record number of Canadians relying on food banks. 7 million Canadians are going hungry. 1 in 5 are skipping meals regularly because they can't afford the price of food. Yeah. Will the Prime Minister get out of the way, stop interfering with the Senate, and let them pass common sense Conservative Bill C-234 to take the tax off the farmers who feed us?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Very interesting response by Pierre. Notice he didn't even acknowledge that Karina Gold even spoke. Sometimes he does. You've seen him. You've seen him throw a quippy rebuttal or make a joke at the Liberals' expense, but he didn't acknowledge anything that she even said. Why? Because he knows that's their game right now. This is all they have on him. So if he engages with any of that, he gives the Liberals what they want, more talking points as it relates to those items. And here's the thing. This is question period. It is ask the government questions, not respond to government questions and accusations, period.
Well, that's it. If he starts responding to these ridiculous, and I mean ridiculous accusations, it puts him on the back foot. Instead, what he's supposed to be doing, which he is doing, is asking questions of the government for Canadians.
Yes, he has to keep his eye on the ball. What is making a difference in the polls? You know what's not making a difference in the polls? MGTOW hashtags. You know what's not making a difference in the polls? Talking about the fact that he's not lying when it comes to these stupid sources that these stupid reporters are bringing forth, and then reneging on, and then attacking him because they're getting government media, because they're getting government money. So that's not working in the polls. What is working in the polls? Affordability. And this just makes the Liberals, I'm sorry, look completely inept, because here's Pierre saying, we have a bill. It's in the Senate. It will cut the cost of food for every single Canadian out there. Why are we not getting this bill through? And the response from the government is, well, he's a liar. It sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just because the leader of the Conservatives says something does not make it true, as we saw in several times last week, whether it was with regards to how they voted on the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, perhaps why he blamed others for his mistakes when it came to how he jumped to a conclusion for a terrorist attack. And now what he's talking about with C-234, he knows that is patently false. And when it comes to food prices, that's because of the war in Ukraine and because of inflation. But Mr. Speaker, he cannot direct the Senate either. And unfortunately, his members are doing things that are threatening the democratic principles and rights of independent senators. That is shameful, Mr. Speaker.
Do you want to know what's shameful, Karina? Is when you began being House Leader this summer, you had said your objective is, and I quote, a question period, they're going to be proud of what they see. And there you are calling the leader of the opposition, you're pretty much calling him a liar in front of everybody. You guys are so down in the polls and you are so threatened by Pierre because you have never, ever seen an opposition leader like him. You don't know what to do.
No, they don't. They have no idea what to do because they've tried everything they can. And the problem is Pierre and the Conservatives have given them nothing. Nothing. There is no major issue that they can get him on. They tried, because remember, that free trade agreement, that was a poisoned bill. And the funny thing is Karina slipped up. She said there is no price on pollution in there.
It's the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement where there is no price on pollution.
Does it not say carbon pricing?
It absolutely does. We've looked at it how many times?
Like we've shown it to you.
Hey, we'll throw it in the description again so you guys can look at it too.
No, here it is again, right here. Carbon pricing. And she says, she's sitting there saying, oh, it's not in there. Yes, it is. Like, who's the one lying here, Karina?
Again, it's like the whole chalet versus cottage thing.
Right. It may be worded slightly differently, but it's there. Come on. You knew they would vote against this. That's why you put it in there. And it was so you could try to create an issue to have them, take a hit in the polls. But they're not stupid.
And Canadians are not stupid. We're smarter than that. We can see what you guys are up to.
So, and this garbage about, he's blaming other people for his mistakes. He's jumping to conclusion. The only conclusion he's jumping to is because your people, Karina, your people, leaked something to the media that said we're operating under the assumption this is a terrorism attack. CTV reported on it. Pierre saw that in the news and then rose in question period and reasonably asked the question. And now you are trying to deny that that even happened. This is who you're dealing with, folks. And then these same people this is the epitome of gaslighting. The people that are calling Pierre a liar are the ones that are lying through your teeth in every single opportunity. It is absolutely asinine.
Well, it's good to see the agriculture minister stand up and defend Canadian farmers. But if the finance minister's plan for Canadians is to cut meals, cut their heat, well, mission accomplished. Your carbon tax plan is working extremely well. But a common sense conservative bill, C-234, will provide a carbon tax carve-out for farmers and make food more affordable for Canadians. But the Prime Minister, as Environment Minister, has promised if this bill passes, he will resign. So is that why the Environment Minister is bullying senators in the Senate to block 234? Because he wants to save his job rather than ensure Canadians can afford to feed themselves?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment.
They started chanting something. I couldn't catch what it was. We'll see if we can get it in post. But the Conservatives started chanting something right there. But man, this is getting crazy.
The Honourable Minister from the Environment, starting from the top.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party of Canada should be ashamed of asking this question in this House after they directed their MPs to bully their senators to bully senators who disagreed with them. One of them had to apologize for bullying some of his colleagues in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. They should be ashamed of themselves. We're not telling senators how to vote. They're doing it, and they're asking them to bully other senators, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, what was that all about? You may be wondering. Well, that could take a whole other video, so I'll try and make it quick. So what happened is they're in the last stages in the Senate of Bill C-234. Now, the Liberals in the Senate introduced an amendment pretty much at the last minute during the last debate for this. And the Conservatives were like, okay, is this an amendment similar to the one that you guys were discussing in committee, which was unanimously rejected? Oh, yes, it's similar. So we're like, okay, so why are you even bringing it here? And normally what's supposed to happen is after an amendment is introduced, there is typically debate and questions on that. But immediately after that happened, the Liberals motioned to adjourn. And the Conservatives lost their minds because they're sitting there saying, what? You don't adjourn debate immediately after putting forth a motion for an amendment. And why did they do that? It's to delay the bill. They're trying to drag this out and delay this as long as possible.
And now we see that there is corruption in both houses in this government, in the House of Commons and the Senate. The Liberals, they cannot avoid corruption at this point. Like, they just everything they do is corrupt.
So what ended up happening, this is what they're talking about, is one of the senators, the senator leader.
It was Senator Plett. It was Don Plett.
Don Plett. Lost his temper, threw his earpiece, because he was just, he was beside himself. And then during the whole vote of trying to adjourn the session, it was all over the place. It was a dog's breakfast, just a disaster. And then the Conservatives are raising points of order to try and stop all of this, and they couldn't. The Speaker let it happen, and Don Plett lost his mind, and unfortunately, this part wasn't recorded, but he walked over to where the Speaker's chair was and where the one minister was, or the one senator was, and started allegedly shouting at them and pointing at them. And then the senators tried to say that Senator Plett was denying their parliamentary privilege, which he can get a lot of trouble for. And it wasn't an issue of privilege because he didn't prevent them from doing their job. Session had ended. And then after that, what was it, Andrew Scheer? I believe
yes.
Andrew Scheer ended up posting the contact information of the senator that put forth that amendment
on Twitter. And now they're saying, oh, Andrew Scheer started a witch hunt and this and that. You know what? This information is publicly available information. You know what? We're going to drop a link to that in the description too, because it's there for everybody to look at. The office phone numbers and the office emails of every single senator in that house is available to Canadians because it is part of their job to interact with the public.
Yeah, they're trying to make it seem like Andrew Scheer, dropped her home address and her home phone number and stuff like that. That's not what he did. He said, Canadians, if you want to let this senator know how you think they're conducting themselves in the Senate, here's their contact information. It is your right to hold them accountable.
Well, and how many times have we done that? How many times have we suggested that you guys contact your MP or an MP responsible for this or that or whatever?
Right. Are we bullying?
No.
No. We are giving you information to hold the people in your government accountable.
As is your right as a Canadian.
So let's just walk through this. So the Liberals are trying to filibuster as much as they can a bill that would make food more affordable to people. They are calling Pierre a liar for things that we have proven that he's been telling the truth on. And lastly, allegedly letting constituents know across the country the contact information, the government contact information of somebody so that they can hold their government people to account. That is now bullying in a Canadian democracy, everybody. So we have officially arrived in the Twilight Zone.